Captain Shieldy Boy, the initial retaliator, is okay. It isn't bad by any means, and it's pretty enjoyable actually. But to me, it seems to be lacking some depth, and the main conflict is serviceable, but pretty basic. Now, I know a lot of people really enjoy this movie, and although I had a decently good time with it, I'll be mainly focusing on the negatives for this review. So, apologies if I sound like a negative Nancy throughout. I found the majority of the background characters were pretty uninteresting, so I'm not going to focus on them too much. The majority of them were cardboard cutouts of who they needed to be for the story to work. There were a couple of lines and moments during the escape of the 107th Regiment that made me think that a couple of scenes were cut, leaving us with the bare minimum for those characters. It's also a shame because I really wanted to care about Bucky, and the movie just didn't give us enough time. Instead, I'm going to focus on the two leads of this movie, Cap and Schmidt. Maybe it's because Cap wins or comes out equal in every single fight he's in, but after his transformation he seems a lot less of a compelling character to me. I don't really know how this movie could have done anything differently, considering that is the character's origin story, so you can't really change it. But hey, maybe it's just that he's so much of a Boy Scout, as well as being powerful and basically incorruptible, and thus he's pretty boring a protagonist in a lot of ways. In fact, on that note, I think Cap works a lot better when he's playing off other characters. It's an easy conflict when your story villain is a Nazi, but it's a lot spicier when you contrast Cap with someone like Tony Stark or Black Widow or Nick Fury. When you have a paragon like Cap, you need a story that will challenge his unshakable sense of duty or faith in the power that he's serving, something that the later movies, and especially The Winter Soldier, do really well. Although I did really like the segment where Cap was just used as a propaganda piece. It's a fun nod to the original purpose of the comics, but it also felt exactly like something the US government would do. I do think, however, that they should have done a little bit more to show Cap's change of heart, rather than just one performance on the front lines and that's it, now he's done with the shows. In contrast, Johann Schmidt is about the most evil McBad guy character that has ever bad guyed. And yeah, I get it. You don't want to make the Nazi character even a little bit sympathetic. Makes sense, but I still think they could have done a bit more with him. Hugo Weaving, however, is a national treasure, and I don't think I've ever seen him phone in a performance. He plays a moustache-twirling villain really well, and he doesn't disappoint in that regard. And yes, as many of you may have noticed, this is another example of power match. I don't really mind it in this movie too much, as it's meant to highlight Cap and Schmidt's differences, despite their origins and similar power sets. Speaking of power, that's really what this whole movie is about. Schmidt uses power to enslave, Cap for breaking them out. Schmidt uses it for conquering, domination and destruction, Cap for protecting the innocent, reducing overreach and righting wrongs. Schmidt is tyrannical and selfish, and Cap is sacrificial and selfless. The movie presents quite a Christian worldview from that perspective when you really sort of dig into it. Now, I've already mentioned the cardboard cutout characters, and what didn't help that at all was the pacing. Everything before Cap's rescue of the 107th was really rather slow, which actually I quite liked. We were working our way up to that moment, which is fine. It made for some nice moments like Steve's chat with Erskine, but everything after the rescue was a bit of a blur, not helped by the fact that most of Cap's missions were shown in montage rather than using them as character building and defining moments. Perhaps through a couple of those missions we could have seen how Cap deals with a true defeat. That would have been interesting, or what he would do in an unwinnable situation. Sure, he loses Bucky in the train segment, but as I've already said, we didn't really spend enough time with Bucky, so it's hard to get emotionally invested in Steve's loss here. In conclusion, Captain America the First Avenger is a decent enough movie, but it doesn't really do anything new. It's a pretty basic origin story with straightforward characters and predictable motivations. That doesn't make the film bad necessarily, and I still enjoyed watching it, and it still has a pretty good moral message in it, even if it doesn't have much depth. 6 out of 10, decent, but not interesting enough to score more, I'm afraid.